She had 3 seconds to make the most important decision of her life. Not the kind of decision that arrives politely, with time to think and room to breathe. The kind that detonates in your chest and leaves you standing in the wreckage of everything you thought you were going to do. The organ had already begun. 400 people were already on their feet. Her father was already at the door, his arm extended, his eyes full of a pride she no longer knew how to receive. And Amara Okafor was standing in the anteroom of St. Michael's Cathedral in Lagos, in 8 months of ivory silk and hand-sewn lace, holding a phone that had just ended her wedding before it began. The doors of the church were behind her. The street was ahead. And somewhere between those two facts was the rest of her life, waiting to be chosen. She looked at the door. She looked at the phone. She looked at the door again. Then she pushed it open and ran. The street hit her like a wall. The heat, the noise, the blinding Lagos afternoon with no interest in her crisis. She ran anyway. And at the end of the block, idling at the curb like it had been parked there by the specific cruelty of fate, was a black Mercedes. And the man leaning against it was watching her with eyes that had seen everything, and were somehow not bored by her. She ran. And she didn't stop. The wedding dress had taken 8 months to make. Amara had stood still for every fitting, every pin, every breathless "you look perfect" from women who meant well and understood nothing. And this morning she had put it on with the mechanical obedience of someone who had forgotten that obedience was a choice. Her mother had cried. Her aunties had photographed everything. The bridesmaids had handed her a glass of water and told her the nerves were normal, that every bride felt this way, that it would pass once she saw Tund waiting for her at the altar. She had smiled and said nothing because it was easier than the truth, and the truth at that point was only a feeling. A persistent, low-grade wrongness she had been explaining away for 3 years. Then her phone had lit up. She hadn't meant to read it. It was a number she didn't recognize, a message forwarded without commentary, and what was in it rewrote everything she thought she knew about the man waiting 30 meters away. It was not a rumor. It was not an accusation. It was documentation, clean, time-stamped, and completely undeniable. Names. Dates. A second life assembled with the same careful attention Tund gave to everything he wanted kept. The organ began. Amara stood completely still. The silk of the dress moved slightly in the air conditioning. Outside the anteroom door, she could hear her father's footsteps approaching, unhurried and certain, because he had no reason yet to be anything else. She looked at the phone one more time. Then she placed it face down on the dressing table with the deliberate quiet of someone setting down something they will never pick up again. She did not walk toward the aisle. She walked toward the other door, the one that opened not into the church but into the side corridor and then down the service stairs and then out into the street. Each step was a door closing behind her. Each step was a door she could not reopen. She knew this. She walked anyway because the alternative was standing still in a dress that had never really been hers, saying yes to a life built on a foundation she had just watched dissolve. The Lagos heat met her like a verdict. She didn't stop. There is something no one tells you about running in a wedding dress. It is not graceful. The skirt catches at your knees and the train drags behind you like an accusation, and the heels, 3 inches of nude satin selected by a stylist who had never once considered their utility in a crisis, are immediately, catastrophically wrong for concrete. Amara kicked them off at the bottom of the church steps without breaking stride, leaving them there on the pavement like 2 small surrenders, and ran barefoot into the street. Lagos did not pause for her. A pepper seller looked up from her cart and stared. 2 men arguing outside a phone repair shop fell silent. A child on the other side of the road pointed, and his mother pulled his arm down with a sharp whisper. The world kept moving, Okadas weaving through traffic, generators humming behind compound walls, the smell of fry oil and hot asphalt rising in the afternoon air, and Amara moved through all of it like a current through a city that had no idea it was carrying her. She did not think. Thinking was what had kept her at that altar for 3 years. Thinking was what had reframed every red flag as a quirk, every cruelty as stress, every silence as discretion. Thinking had dressed her in ivory silk and handed her a bouquet of peonies and walked her to the edge of a life that would have consumed her quietly, politely, with excellent catering and 400 witnesses. She was done thinking. Her feet on the hot pavement were the most honest thing about her. The air in her lungs was the most honest thing she had felt in months. The dress was ruined, the hem gray with street dust, the train torn at one edge where it had caught on the step, and she found that she did not care at all. It was a liberating kind of not caring. The specific freedom of someone who has already lost the thing they were most afraid of losing, and discovered that the losing was survivable. She turned a corner. She didn't know this street. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she was going, and that for the first time in a very long time, the direction was entirely her own. Then she saw the car. The black Mercedes was idling at the curb with the particular stillness of something that belonged to a different category of the world, not just expensive but untouchable, the kind of vehicle that existed in a lane of reality that regular traffic instinctively avoided. Two men in dark suits stood flanking it, their posture the specific kind of relaxed that is actually the opposite of relaxed. They saw her coming. Their hands moved. Amara didn't see the hands. She saw the car, and then the corner, and then misjudged the distance between herself and both by the margin of one desperate, breathless step. She hit the side panel with her shoulder. The impact spun her, and she caught herself against the door with both palms, the silk of her dress smearing against the glossy black surface. Before she could straighten, both men were in motion. Lee Hyun-woo from the left, Park Jun-suk from the right, their movements clean and immediate in the way of people trained to respond to disruption before they have consciously registered it. Then a hand rose. One gesture, unhurried, absolute. Both men stopped. Amara straightened. She pushed the hair from her face. Her palms were stinging from the door. Her dress was destroyed. She had no shoes and no plan and no idea what she was going to do next, and she was standing in the middle of a Lego street with her hands braced against a stranger's car, breathing like she had just escaped something, which she had, though she could not yet fully name it. She looked up. The man leaning against the car had not moved. He was watching her with an expression that was not concern, not amusement, not the performative alarm of someone who felt required to react. It was simply attention, complete, unhurried, and unreadable. He was dressed in black from collar to shoe, and he wore it the way certain men wear authority, not as a costume but as a second skin. His eyes were very still. Amara looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them spoke for 3 full seconds. In the distance, from the direction she had come, she heard a door open. She heard her name in a voice she recognized, in a register she had never heard from it before. Tun Baligan did not run. Men like Tun did not run. Running implied panic, and panic implied a loss of control that was incompatible with everything he had spent 38 years constructing. He walked out of the church with measured steps, his agbada immaculate, his jaw set at the precise angle that communicated displeasure without descending into the vulgarity of visible emotion. His groomsmen followed at a distance, uncertain whether to help or simply witness. He saw her at the end of the block. He saw the Mercedes. He saw the men in suits. Something moved behind his eyes quickly and was gone. He walked toward her with the patient certainty of a man who had never once been refused something he had decided to have. The street seemed to clear around him, or perhaps people simply felt the temperature drop and stepped back. He stopped 6 feet away. He looked at the state of her dress. He looked at her bare feet on the hot pavement. Something in his face tightened, a very controlled disgust, the expression of a man confronted with a mess he hadn't authorized. Amara. His voice was quiet. That was the most frightening thing about it. Come back inside. 2 words. Back inside. As though the last 20 minutes had been a brief and correctable interruption. As though what she had read on that phone was a misunderstanding that could be smoothed over behind the closed doors of a church anteroom, renegotiated, absorbed into the architecture of their life together and never mentioned again. His voice said, "This is not a conversation." His eyes said, "You have embarrassed me in front of 400 people and I will not forget it." His stillness said, "I am giving you one opportunity to choose correctly." Amara looked at him. The man she had agreed to marry. The man she had defended to her friends, explained to her mother, accommodated in 100 small and significant ways, each one a quiet subtraction from who she actually was. She said nothing. Because there was nothing to say. The message on the phone had said everything. And the silence between them now held the full weight of it, every word, every name, every date, hanging in the Legos heat between them like evidence. What happened next was not a confrontation. It was a recalibration. Tun's eyes moved, as they naturally would, to the obstacle between himself and the situation he intended to resolve. The man in black had not moved. Had not shifted his weight, adjusted his stance, or acknowledged the scene unfolding in front of him in any way that suggested he found it remarkable. He was simply present. The way a wall is present, the way the ground is present, the way certain facts are present. Not aggressively, simply as an immovable condition of the space. Lee Hyun-woo and Park Jun-suk had not moved either. Their hands were visible. Their eyes were on Tund with the flat, methodical attention of people whose job is to assess rather than react, and who have clearly assessed and found the situation beneath a particular threshold, for now. Tund was a powerful man. He had built his power deliberately, from foundation to ceiling, and he understood its architecture well enough to recognize a different kind of power when he was standing in front of it. This man in the black suit had not spoken a word, had made no gesture of challenge or protection. He had simply remained where he was, and in doing so had drawn a line in the air that Tund understood with absolute clarity he was not equipped, in this moment, in this street, in this Igbata, to cross. The calculation behind his eyes shifted. It was brief. The reassessment happened in seconds, and then his face rearranged itself into something controlled and contemptuous. He straightened his sleeve. He looked past the man in black to Amara, and what was in his gaze now was no longer a demand but a verdict, the pronouncement of a man who has decided that the thing he is looking at is no longer worth the cost of obtaining it, and who needs the world to believe that the decision was entirely his. "You will regret this," he said. Not to the man in black. To her. Then he turned and walked back toward the church and did not look back because looking back would have required him to admit that he was walking away from something he could not have. Amara did not watch him go for long. She turned and looked at the car door. It was open. She wasn't sure when that had happened, whether Lee Hyun-woo had opened it or the man in black himself, and she found she couldn't locate the moment in her memory. She looked at the interior, dark leather, cool air visible in the temperature shimmer at the opening, a space that was quiet in a way the street was not. She looked at the man in black who was now standing at the other door, his hand resting on the roof, his expression carrying precisely nothing. He did not invite her. He did not reach for her. He did not say "you'll be safe" or "I'll help you" or any of the things that a person says when they are offering rescue. He simply stood there making room and left the decision entirely to her. Amara got in. She told herself it was tactical. That she needed to be somewhere that was not this street, not this address, not the radius of this disaster, and that the car was a practical solution to a spatial problem. She told herself she would ride 2 blocks, ask him to stop, get out, and figure out the rest from there. She was a grown woman with a postgraduate degree and a functioning mind. She did not need saving. She was not being saved. She was making an informed, temporary, logistical decision. The door closed. The street disappeared. Through the tinted glass, she could see Tun's back as he climbed the church steps. She could see the bridesmaids clustered at the top, watching. She could see her mother, a small figure in burgundy lace, both hands pressed to her mouth. She watched all of it recede as the car moved, growing smaller, becoming a scene from a life she had just walked out of, and she waited, with genuine clinical attention, for the guilt to arrive. It didn't come. What came instead was something quieter and more unfamiliar, something she had no immediate word for. It sat in her chest where the tightness had been for 3 years, occupying the space the way light occupies a room when a curtain is pulled back. Not happiness. Not relief. Something more foundational than either. The simple, staggering sensation of having told the truth with her feet when her voice had failed her. She folded her hands in her lap. She looked straight ahead. The city moved past the windows in amber and shadow. He did not ask her anything. Not her name. Not where she wanted to go. Not what had happened back there on the street, though he had watched all of it with those still, complete eyes and clearly required no explanation. He sat on his side of the car with the relaxed economy of a man who considered silence a perfectly functional state of affairs, and looked out the window at Lagos moving past and said nothing. Amara had expected questions. She had braced for them, was already arranging her answers in terms that would be efficient and unemotional and entirely sufficient. She was good at this, the controlled disclosure, the version of events that conveyed the necessary information while revealing as little of the interior as possible. She had been doing it for years. She had become, without quite deciding to, a woman fluent in the language of managed appearances. The silence made that fluency useless. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. That was the disorienting part. It wasn't the silence of someone waiting for her to speak, the loaded kind that sits in the room like a guest everyone is trying not to look at. It was simply silence, undemanding, unpressured, occupying the car the way the air conditioning did as a neutral and necessary condition. He wasn't withholding anything. He was simply not performing the social obligation she had expected, and the absence of that performance was doing something strange to the air around her. She looked at him from the corner of her eye. His profile was clean and severe in the afternoon light coming through the glass. A small scar ran along the line of his jaw, old and faded, a detail that his face seemed completely indifferent to. His hands rested on his knee, relaxed. He was not on his phone. He was not consulting anyone. He was simply present in the car, in the way that people are present when they are not using the moment for anything else. It was, she realized, the first silence in a very long time that did not feel like punishment. Every other silence in her recent life had been loaded. Her mother's silence when Amara questioned the wedding timeline, Tun's silence when she raised the issue of his travel, the silence of her own voice when she had things to say and swallowed them instead because the room was not safe for the truth. Silence had been a weapon in her experience, a withholding, a wall dressed up as nothing. This was different. She didn't understand it. She didn't trust it. But she couldn't look away from him. She spoke at a traffic light somewhere on Ozumbambadu, when the city slowed around them and the silence had lasted long enough to become its own kind of pressure. Not an uncomfortable pressure. A ripening one. The kind that precedes honesty the way a certain quality of light precedes rain. He had another family, she said. She hadn't planned to say that first. She had planned to say something smaller, something at the edge of the truth rather than the center of it. But in the quiet of this car, with its neutral air and its complete absence of expectation, the center had come out before the edges could arrange themselves around it. She looked at her hands. 3 years. A woman in Abuja. 2 children. The youngest is 14 months old. She paused. I found out 40 minutes before the ceremony. She waited. She was good at reading the micro-expressions of people processing information about her. The fractional widening of the eyes that meant that is worse than I expected. The careful adjustment of the mouth that meant I am deciding how much sympathy is appropriate. The particular stillness of a face that has decided to reserve judgment while the body broadcasts it anyway. She had learned to read all of these things and to manage her own response to them with the efficiency of long practice. Kang Min-jae's face gave her nothing to read. He was listening. She was certain of that. His attention had shifted to her in the way of someone who has reoriented themselves toward a sound they are taking seriously. But his expression did not perform anything on her behalf. Not shock, not sympathy, not the reflexive outrage of someone who needs her to know that they have understood the severity of her situation. He simply received the information with the quality of someone who had decided, somewhere prior to this moment, that other people's truths deserved a hearing rather than an immediate response. She kept talking. Not to fill the silence. The silence no longer needed filling, but because something had loosened. She told him about her mother's ambitions and her father's relief and the 3 years of incrementally accepting a smaller version of herself as the price of keeping everyone around her comfortable. She didn't perform any of it. She didn't reach for composure or elegance. She simply said the true things in the order they came, and felt each one leave her like weight redistributed. When she finished, the light was green. The city moved again. She looked at him. He was looking at the road. It was the most dangerous thing he had done yet, that listening. Because she had no defense against being heard. The car stopped outside a hotel she didn't recognize. Not far from the island, she could still smell the water. The driver remained still. Lee Hyun-woo and Park Jun-suk were quiet as furniture. The city moved around them without interest. Kang Min-jae did not get out. He looked at the street ahead for a moment, and Amara had the sense of a man choosing words with the care of someone who does not use many and therefore cannot afford to waste them. She waited without knowing she was waiting or perhaps knowing it exactly. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. It was not soft. There was nothing soft about this man, but it was low, calibrated for her alone, the register of someone who understands that the most important things are not said loudly. You ran in the wrong shoes, he said, and you didn't fall. That was it. No elaboration. No metaphor explained. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't tell her she was brave. He didn't offer what came next or position himself as any part of it. He simply said the thing he had observed, the specific and exact truth of what he had seen when she came around that corner, and left it in the air between them for her to do with what she would. Amara sat with it. She had been told she was beautiful. She had been told she was accomplished, that she was a good daughter, that she would make a wonderful wife. She had been told all the things that people tell a woman when they are arranging her into a shape they find useful. But she had never been told something as plain and precise as this. A simple observation of a thing she had actually done, seen clearly, by someone who had nothing to gain from saying it kindly. She thought about the shoes on the church steps. She thought about her feet on the hot pavement. She thought about the moment she had chosen the door over the aisle and discovered that her legs remembered how to carry her even when her mind hadn't finished deciding. She looked at him. He was already looking at the street. "Thank you," she said, and meant something larger than the word. She reached for the door handle. And stopped. The door was right there. The hotel was right there. Her next chapter, chaotic, unwritten, terrifying, was right there. She was not afraid of it. Or rather, she was afraid of it and was going to walk into it anyway, which she understood now was what courage actually was. She was not ready to leave. She stayed another moment, in the quiet of the car, in the particular silence that was not punishment. She let herself have it. Then she opened the door and stepped into the rest of her life. The bravest thing Amara Okafor did that day was not running from the altar. It was refusing to wait until she was certain before she moved. Courage rarely announces itself cleanly. It arrives in the middle of chaos, in bare feet on hot pavement, with no clear destination and no guarantee of arrival. The lesson the story carries is not that a powerful stranger will appear to save you. He didn't save her, and that is precisely the point. The lesson is that the moment you choose your own truth over other people's comfort, you become capable of things you did not know you could do. You run in the wrong shoes. You don't fall. And eventually someone sees it. But more importantly, so do you.